Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining our GPTA webinar event. I would like to start off just a couple intro items. I would like to thank Darren Potke, who's Executive Director of USTA Georgia, for allowing GPTA to use USTA Georgia's GoToWebinar account and for setting up this event. And Darren is here with me. He's behind the scenes from a technology standpoint, running the show. So we thank USTA Georgia and Darren Potke in particular. They're a great partner of GPTA, and we really appreciate everything that they do for our organization. This event will be recorded, and we'll send out an email to the members to view it in the future. I will actually be one of two speakers today. A little bit about myself. My name's Dom Masciantonio, and I'm currently president of the GPTA. And also I'm a past president of USTA Georgia and a 36-year volunteer for USTA Georgia and a 12-year volunteer for USTA Southern. And my background, basically, I have recently retired from a 40-year career, banking and finance career, looking to increase my part-time tennis teaching now that I'm retired, which I have done on and off over the 30+ years of part-time teaching tennis. I am not a financial advisor, so I want to make that clear. And however, I've done a couple of these personal finance presentations while I was at the bank on a volunteer basis to various communities, and also basically just self-educating and based on my degree and background of obtained a lot of information and knowledge. But again, I'm not a financial advisor, and just wanted to make that clarification. This presentation is going to be geared really towards those of you in your 20s and probably through 50s, but really it can include anyone regardless of age. After my presentation, there will be a recorded presentation that Steve Milano will be doing. It will be recorded. There will be slides. Steve's going to be talking on tax deductions for independent contractors and some personal credit management tips. So that will follow my presentation. Steve's background, he's used to be a tennis teacher, then got into business consulting. He's really a trained journalist, and he like I, and he'll explain when he starts his presentation that he's not a financial advisor, and he's really passing on information on several articles he has written over the years on these particular subjects. My presentation will kind of focus on two concepts. The first will be really a basic concept of personal finance on budgeting, and the second will be on saving for retirement, which seems to kind of be a hot button for really everybody. With that, I would like to get started, and want to open with 5 key money mistakes to avoid. And the first one is really postponing saving. When any of us have a little bit of money left over after paying bills, it's really easy to fall in the trap of saying, well, I'll start to save just as soon as I can, or I might be in my early 20s and saying, why do I need to start saving now? I've got the rest of my life to start saving. That really is kind of a dangerous thinking, because as we grow older, our lives become much more expensive. You may be renting in your 20s and 30s, but maybe in your late 30s or 40s, you want to buy a house. So you go from renting to owning. That typically increases your expenses because you will have property taxes and maintenance and other stuff that you wouldn't necessarily have while you're renting, although you would have ownership and have an asset as opposed to not having an asset renting. You might be single, and then all of a sudden you get married. You have children. There's expenses with children. A little bit older, you have some vacation. You may want to travel, take vacations. They for the most part cost money. And then as you really grow older into your 40s, 50s, and 60s, and so forth, you have healthcare expenses just by the nature of our bodies tend to break down as we get older, and then other stuff, dental, vision, all these expenses tend to increase when you get older. So not thinking about them or not having them when you're younger, that's really not an excuse to start thinking down the road in the future when those years do go by. So really finding a way to save a little each month is really how to get ahead and make financial progress toward goals. The second money mistake to avoid is really having an inadequate or a non-existent rainy day fund, or sometimes it's called an emergency fund. The general rule of thumb that any financial expert, even a financial advisor, any publication, finance publication, will say is that you really need to save 3 to 6 months worth of monthly living expenses in cash. And again, it's your monthly living expenses that you should be saving in this emergency and rainy day fund. And you really keep this separate. You keep it in a savings account, which typically can be tied to your checking account, but you really don't want it in your checking account. You want it in a savings account where it's separate, and you could see that amount growing to where you feel comfortable that there's enough there for the rainy day fund. And again, it should be in a savings account. Typically, money markets are the best to put this, not in a regular savings account. Now interest rates are so low, so really it doesn't matter. But money market accounts tend to be a little bit higher earning interest from an interest rate standpoint than keeping it in a regular savings or your checking account. And also it makes for a quick transfer from your savings into your checking if you need to tap that emergency fund for some sort of emergency expense. Just giving a couple little side notes here. There was a 2019 Charles Schwab, which is one of the premier and reputable investment companies out there. They had a survey that said 62% of millennials, which in your 22 to 38 year age range, say they are living paycheck to paycheck. That's an alarming number, and really, if you fall into that category, you really should find a way to get out of that. And hopefully, as we go on in this presentation, that give you some tips here to try to help you get out of it. There is also another really good personal financial website called bankrate.com, and their survey that was done last year said that 41% of U.S. adults have saved enough to cover just $1,000 of emergencies in their funds, and 16% of them say that they use a credit card for really their emergency funds. 14% said they borrow from family members, and 7% say that they take out a personal loan. So that kind of gives you an idea that if you don't have that rainy day fund, that you basically fall into the debt trap to utilize an emergency fund when you need it, because let's face it, emergencies come and they're never planned. So, having a fund there really helps ease the stress and financial burden if you're able to create that fund and kind of transfer money into it on a regular basis. Another reason to keep like an emergency fund separate in a savings account, and it's obviously have it tied to your checking account. It's much easier to and quickly transfer to your checking account when you need that expense when it pops up, because typically these emergencies, if they pop up, you need to pay for them pretty quick. So again, having a rainy day fund, emergency fund is really something that you want to have and you don't want to avoid. The third key point of money mistakes to avoid is having too many credit cards. Credit cards, they obviously require personal restraint, and consistently paying off the entire balance month after month is really the best way to utilize these your credit cards effectively. If your financial situation dictates higher use of credit cards and you carry a lot of debt, then you really need to try to be disciplined and try to pay down that debt as quickly as possible, but at the same time still save. Still try to even if it is you're paying down the minimum, you still want to put a little bit into savings and just not have your emergency fund or a rainy day fund not funded at all while you're paying down debt. You got to find a way to balance and do the best you can to get that debt paid off as soon as possible, particularly if it's high interest rate debt. But also don't sacrifice not saving for your rainy day fund. There are several good sources to use from credit card standpoint. You really want to find 2 good credit cards and use them responsibly, and also look for what credit cards have the best perks, and that basically will help you from a rewards standpoint. There's so many credit cards out there and they're all looking for the business that you could compare and see who has the best perks. And if you're able to pay off your balance every month, then you get these rewards built up much quicker. But also carrying 2 credit cards and using them responsibly helps to build your credit score. And actually, a part of Steve's Milano's presentation later, we'll get into credit scoring and credit management. There are some good sources to go to look at all these credit cards, the different credit cards, and see which ones has perks and the interest rates and everything on them. I mentioned bankrate.com is one. It's bankrate, one word.com. There's another good website that is actually he's local, but he's nationally syndicated. Clark Howard. You can go to clark.com, and he has all the different articles on best credit cards, and it's really good. And also there's a website called Nerd Wallet, NERD Wallet, one word. That's a good source. And again, these are all good sources to kind of shop and compare for the best reward cards and also what interest rates some of these credit cards would carry. Number fourth money mistake to avoid is not saving enough for retirement. This is something that really you need to make certain that you take full advantage. If you happen to be employed at one of the larger private clubs or a large public run company that runs various tennis facilities, they may offer their full-time employees a 401k plan. And if they do, if there's any matching that they do, you really need to take advantage of that and sign up. Now, I know a lot of people, if you're an independent contractor, independent teaching pro, or part-time pro, where you get no benefits, or you're at a club where there's no benefits, then really you need to definitely, from a retirement aspect, open up what's called a Roth IRA. And I'll go a little bit deeper into that in a little bit here, together with another way self-employed independent contractors can fund their retirement through what's called a SEP, S-E-P IRA. And I'll get into both of those in a minute later on in the presentation. Again, throwing out these numbers, and it's just good to see some of these surveys and statistics. But of all Americans, 21% have no retirement savings. That's again an alarming amount of people. 10% say they have 5,000 or less, and the average retirement savings for all Americans is about $84,000. So that's kind of that's not very good, but if you fall into one of those categories, again, this is something that might get you thinking to try to get out of that that mode and try to save, both for a rainy day fund and for retirement. There's also a general rule of thumb for saving for retirement, and it's based on age and what a lot of experts out there say you should have saved. But if you take your total income, and if you really should, for retirement purposes, have 1 times your income saved in retirement by age 30. And then it really increases by 1 every 5 years. So you really should have 2 times your income by age 35, 3 times your income by 40, and so forth, 4 by 45, and so forth. That is a general rule of thumb that most financial advisors and experts and articles out there say that you should have in a retirement account. And we go to the 5th money mistake to avoid: really spending money you don't have. And obviously, with the rise of consumerism we have in this country, which is a very good thing, everybody's trying to market you to sell something, and buy this to save time, but it costs money. There's really a fine line between living the good life and taking out an insurmountable level of debt. It's really imperative to be cognizant of your income level and your cash flow. And really, the key is to spend within your means, and that hopefully will enable you to create this emergency fund and fund it, and also create a retirement fund and fund that. And if you don't, then you'll really never be able to save for any emergencies or retirement if you're not living within your means. Okay, so where do we go from here? I want to spend some time on talking on the first topic here, which is budgeting. And it sounds very easy, budgeting, but there's really 5 simple steps, simple as they're stated simply. Now, executing and carrying out, those budgeting steps might be a little difficult, but really, you really should maintain a budget, and that really makes sure that your income exceeds your expenses. And a lot of people in the budgeting process, they do not include the emergency savings fund or retirement fund. They just say, well, here's my expenses, and if I have anything left over, I'll put it in an emergency fund, or I'll think about putting it in retirement. So really, during your budgeting process, if you sit down and say, okay, I'm going to do a budget, How do I do it? You really want to include both your emergency savings, rainy day fund, and a retirement fund in your budget. So you really are forced to fund both of those like they were any expense. Writing down your goals really makes them, more likely to happen. If you don't write down goals, what you want to do, with your money every month, then if you don't write down goals, then they won't be achieved. But if you have a budget with goals, which include emergency savings and retirement, you're more likely to have those goals be realized and happen. It really also reveals, if you sit down and do a budget, it reveals insights into sometimes self-destructive spending habits that those of us may have that go unnoticed. It really kind of makes you aware of, oh geez, I've got this much going to here, spending this. That's really what a budget does. And even if you go through a budget, you create one, and you need to make spending cuts. Even small ones have a huge impact over time. Let's say every day before you go to the club or before you go on a court to teach, you're on your way, you stop off and you get that $6 fancy latte at Starbucks. If you got a $6 latte at Starbucks every morning, and you switched it to a $2 regular coffee at QT or Racetrack or McDonald's, you would really create over $1,000 in savings in a year. So it's just something small that you think you're spending on, and you need to make cuts. Even though it's small, it can add up over time. So don't ignore those small expenses when you're budgeting, and then you got to go through your budget to try to make some cuts. Okay, number one, first step, calculate your income. That's pretty easy. That's the easy part. How much money do you have coming in every month? It includes obviously your take-home pay after taxes or benefits or any other deductions, and then add any other sources of income that you might be doing on the side. Now, if you're self-employed and you're on a 1099, then obviously you'll have to do a little bit more homework to back out what your average payment in taxes would be every year, and just back that out of your monthly, your monthly take-home pay. But you really want to do it after taxes, definitely after taxes. And again, if you have any other benefits that come out of that. So if you have separate health care, private insurance, I guess Obamacare, whatever it is, then that obviously you can figure that in your budget, and instead of putting it in a budget line, just take it out at the top and net your income that way to start your basically your numerator. Second step, write down a list of all your monthly expenses. Just sit down. This is the tougher part. You got to really sit down and say, okay, where's all my money every month going? You can start by any statements that you have, your monthly statements, record your bills, and you create budget categories. If you have a rent payment, boom, you have a category called rent, put in there. Track how much you pay in groceries every month, write that down, groceries, utilities, cell phone, etc. All the different categories you want to create and itemize, and then just figure out how much am I spending, and just write down what you're spending in each of those categories. If you happen to have a bill, for example, like an auto insurance bill that you pay the premium every 6 months, not monthly, or any other bill that you do not pay monthly, then just whatever that total amount is, just divide it by the number of months to come up with a monthly figure, and then plug in your monthly figure. So if you have a $600 auto insurance premium every 6 months, set aside $100 every month, keep it in a savings account so you know it's there. And when you need to make that payment, then you can easily transfer it into your checking and make your car insurance payment or whatever payments due when it's due. Third step, analyze your spending and set goals. You really need to plan your spending by setting a dollar amount up, like I mentioned, for each category. So you have all these, you have 10, 15, 20 different budget categories. Set that dollar amount, put in a dollar amount what you think you're spending on those each month, and record your actual spending at the end of each month in those categories. And then you'll get a picture of what exactly you're spending, and then you can go through the following month and make adjustments as you need per your budget category. Say, oh man, I'm spending way too much, on groceries, whatever. I could probably cut that by $50, and then I could put that $50 in the emergency fund or another category. So you want to go through each month and make adjustments as necessary. The key is really to set realistic monthly goals, for each budget category. So they got to be realistic. Some of them, they are what they are, whether it's a car payment, whether it's gas, whatever it is, utility, they are what they are. So you put those in, and other expense categories that are more discretionary. Again, you want to be realistic on, how much really should I be spending on these discretionary amounts each month. So really, you start where you start, and you do building blocks each month thereafter, making any adjustments as necessary. You really also, you don't want to overwhelm yourself, and it can be overwhelming. You sit down, you start getting stressed. You say, "Oh, geez, I'm spending this, and boy, I'm spending this category, and I need to pay this bill, and there's another bill coming up." So it's really hard to try to do everything at once, but it gives you a picture, and then you just you make your adjustments, and they may be slow, but the stress level will probably subside a little bit if you make those adjustments. And they sometimes they're mentally they're tough, but if you're disciplined, you can do it. You can really do it and get your expenses under control. Once they're under control, then you'll see that it frees up some money, and it gives you options to and your options become real clear what to do with the money that you manage not to spend. And again, putting it really in those two tough categories, which is that rainy day fund and retirement, that people say, they just don't have any money left over at the end of the month to do that. The fourth step is really record everything. And I kind of alluded to that, the two steps before this, but you really want to record everything. The only way you're going to hold yourself accountable is really to track your spending over time. You just have to do it. And again, it causes some, discipline and some, realization of, oh, geez, what am I spending? Because a lot of people they don't have a clue, because they just really haven't tracked it and over time and wrote it down. After you record everything, then again, you basically review your spending habits. And the good thing to do is, look at them once a week. Look for whatever patterns that you have in spending, what you're doing with that discretionary income, and you're just, it's basically not discretionary because you're spending it every month, but you really don't have to, or you could spend less. Just, look at those patterns, and again, make adjustments as needed to your budget. Okay, the fifth and last budgeting step is really to knock out debt. That's going to be key to help you build your savings. You really use any money left over in your budget to reach those what we call long-term goals faster. And the long-term goals, again, are typically an emergency fund, and retirement. They tend to be your longer term goals, or maybe maybe you're saving for a house, or you're saving for one of your children's wedding, or whatever it is, whatever long-term goals out there. You're saving for a vacation, you want to go to Europe, whatever. Again, using that money left over in your budget helps you reach those goals faster, and basically, fund those goals. You want to prioritize things, obviously, like paying off credit card debt, building emergency fund, and funding retirement. But as I mentioned earlier, paying off credit card debt is key, but in your budgeting process, you still want to have those categories for the emergency fund and your retirement fund, and try to fund those, not try, but incorporate a way to fund those, no matter what the amount is, as you're paying down your credit card debt. There's an old saying, preferably you should pay yourself first. And they say, well, what does that mean? Pay yourself first. Typically, you have income. Pay yourself first would be, I'm gonna first fund my rainy day fund or my retirement fund. Then you go through the rest of your expenses. Now, not everybody can do that if you're not living within your means, but if you are living within your means, you should really, again, pay yourself first, and then obviously work on the other, categories that you have budgeted. If you are funding for retirement, it is ideally to try to max out funding whatever that retirement amount is that's by law, legally, you're able to fund in retirement. And I'll be getting into a little bit as to those numbers and what do you max out on in retirement in these Roth funds or these SEP funds, in a little bit later in the presentation here. So, okay, how do I create this budget? I know, I'm saying write down your income and then write down your expenses. There's all these free worksheets that are out there, and they're really easy to do. A lot of them, you plug in numbers and they automatically calculate. You'd be surprised, how many tools are out there for everybody to basically create a monthly budget. And these are all for free. They're forms that are online. I've listed some of them here for you. Some of the websites to go to. There's this consumer.gov. There's AARP. Even though you're not an old fart and over 50, you still could utilize their monthly budget form at aarp.org. There's TIA.org, which is one of the largest and oldest investment companies out there. It's a teachers insurance annuity association, I believe it is, but it's just not for teachers. It's anybody could choose them as an investment management company. That's an investment management company. And there's other stuff. There's most of your local banks. If you have a local bank or a credit union you use, they'll usually go to their website. They usually have some sort of monthly budgeting forms, but these I've listed here, Sallie Mae and the Navy Federal Credit are some of the more popular ones, and they're really easy to use. There's again, just start Googling, free monthly, budget forms, and you'll see a ton of them pop up. So that'll give you a good start to sit down and create your budget. Some final thoughts on the budgeting portion here of the presentation. If it's very basic. If you're overspending, then address at least one spending category per month and make the necessary adjustments. Don't, again, let it overwhelm you, but you have to sit down and really, be true to yourself and figure out where can I cut a little bit? Where can I make adjustments? And then really, once you're living on less than you make, you basically create the freedom and choice and flexibility to better manage your financial, situation. That's, again, pretty basic, but it's really hard for a lot of people to come around to do unless they really are committed and disciplined and want to do it. Next, we'll jump into the next topic as far as from a savings and retirement aspect. How to start investing and saving for retirement if you haven't already done it. Again, if your employer offers a retirement plan, by all means, sign up for it. I mean, it's and especially if they have a matching component. Even if they don't have a matching component, if one's offered to you, sign up. If your employer doesn't offer one, then obviously instead of a 401k, there's the equivalent of a 401k for a self-employed independent contractor is what's called a SEP account, SEP IRA. And I'll get into that in a little bit. And also, you could fund a Roth IRA. And actually, you can fund both a Roth IRA and a SEP IRA. But again, based on everyone's income and whatever their financial situation is, it might be tough to fund both. But ideally, you want to try to fund both when you start, saving for retirement. A lot of both a SEP IRA, when you set one up, and a Roth IRA, both you can do an automated process where, again, when I mentioned pay yourself first, you could set up, X amount every month, and it could come out of your, paycheck every month if your employer can do that, or if you're self-employed, you just, take it out and you set it up from your bank standpoint, and it just automate it and save that amount each month. There's an old saying, out of sight, out of mind. So if you fund it first and it's funded and it's there, it's gone, you don't have to, worry about tapping it or using it and spending it. It's basically set aside and it's gone and it's in retirement, because you won't need it for many, many years. That's the whole purpose as a retirement aspect. Number two, once you've enrolled in whatever it is, if it's a 401k, if it's a SEP IRA, or if it's a Roth IRA, you need to select your investments. Okay, where do I put this money in if I'm investing it for the future and not going to touch it for 20, 30, 40 years? Suggestion, if you're starting out and you're not really financially savvy or educated, is you keep it simple. There's really the best and easiest choice to invest in is what is called these target date retirement funds. What they are these funds are made up of stocks and bonds in a specific ratio that changes as you age. And you basically pick the target fund closest to the year you expect to retire and contribute on a regular basis. So for example, if you're 27 years old and you plan to retire at 67, that's really 40 years away. It's 2020 now. So you would pick a target date fund called Target Date 2060. And again, that is something where these target funds, they're a mix, again, between stocks and bonds that you select, and automatically they adjust as you get closer to retirement. So typically, based on age, as you age, they automatically adjust these funds where they become more conservative as you age. And they gradually go from a large portion of stocks and a smaller portion of bonds to a smaller portion of stocks and a larger portion of bonds. That's what these target funds are. So they're they're a mix. They're kind of a balanced, diversified mix of stocks and bonds. So if you're like in your 20s and 30s, and you pick your target date when to retire, for the next 5, 6, 7 years, they might be 80% in stocks and only 20% in bonds or what's called fixed income. And then as you age, if you get into your 30s and 40s, they start shifting. So eventually, if you get to your late 50s, 60s, they may be 40% bonds and 60%, 40% stocks and 60% bonds or what's called fixed income. So again, they adjust automatically. It really lets you just take a set it and forget it approach to investing. It's really a simple form of investing, and they're very, very popular funds. If you're not, again, financially savvy, I think that's where the starting point is, and then you can always get out of these funds and go into something that's that you might be more educated in, or if you end up eventually hiring a financial advisor, they could advise on certain things. But this is really the basic and most conservative way to begin investing for retirement in your early years. Okay, so where can I open a target date fund? Besides just opening up any retirement fund, opening up a target date fund, which is a type of fund, there's really three best well-known and reputable investment companies, and they're Vanguard, Fidelity Investments, and Charles Schwab. Now they're not the only ones. There's a ton of them out there, but these are three of the largest. It's really easy to open these accounts. They can be easily accessed. Their fees are very reasonable. A lot of these other places, if you have a bank that has an investment arm, they may typically, the banks that have investment companies and you invest in retirement, they'll charge you a little bit more, unless you're doing you're opening an IRA with a CD or something like that. But if you're doing it in investments, they tend to charge a little bit more. But these three they're huge companies. They're well known, and this is the best way to get started if, again, you're not financially inclined or educated to the point where you know what to do. The names of these target date funds in general, Vanguard's is called Vanguard Target Retirement Funds. It's really easy. You go to their website and you just you can click on these target retirement funds. It shows you all of them. Fidelity's is called Fidelity Freedom Funds, and Charles Schwab is called Charles Schwab Retirement Funds. So it's all pretty basic once you get to their website and do a search. So then what do we do? Obviously, once you've set these up, whether it's a SEP IRA or a Roth IRA, is you got to set your contribution level. So that depends on if you have a 401k with an employer. Obviously, you'll need to contribute the minimum necessary to pick up the full employer's company match. So if your company does offer a match, please try to max out their match. Now, their match is always less than what you could fully fund in a year in your 401k, but some companies do up to 2%, some do 6% of your salary. It just varies. Some do 50%, some it's all across the board. But if you happen to be fortunate enough to have an employer that does offer 401k and they offer some sort of matching, you really need to contribute the amount necessary to get the full match, because that's free money. That is totally free money that your employer's contributing to your retirement. If you're self-employed, which probably most teaching professionals probably are, and their employer doesn't, if they are employed, they don't have a 401k offered to them. you really want to try to contribute as a rule of thumb, 6 to 10% of your monthly paycheck. And that can go into, again, what's called either, you can set up a SEP IRA or a Roth IRA. And again, I'll get into the SEP in a little bit more detail here, and a Roth. And then after you've funded, and if you're able to contribute 6 to 10%, you really want to seek to try to increase your contribution rate 1% every 6 months if you can, because eventually you want to really get, the general rule of thumb is to have really 15% of your income or more, put in for retirement each month. I know it's a lot of money, but you start out slow, and you can eventually, build up as you maybe move on into positions and or your income increases, or your their circumstances change where your income is able to be increased. And again, you want to increase your contributions to both these retirement accounts, or one if you only have one set up, and you want to be able to hit the maximum, the ceiling allowed that you can contribute by law. And those limits by law, for example, for 2020, if you're in a 401k with an employer, the maximum that you could do each year is $19,500, or $26,000 a year if you're over 50 years old. There's a thing called catch-up contribution that's another $6,500 that people that are 50 and older can do. Now, again, 401k, if you have one, then you know that it's a pre-tax contribution. So you don't pay taxes on that money going in there, but when you start withdrawing it, you'll have to pay the taxes when you start withdrawing it at retirement age, or whenever you decide to do it later in your later years. If you do a Roth IRA, the maximum you can do is $6,000 per year, and if you're over 50 years old, you can do $7,000. Now, a Roth IRA, which is different from a traditional 401k or type of retirement plan, a Roth IRA is after-tax contribution. So you've already paid taxes on that money, and if you open a Roth, when you retire, you will not have to pay taxes, which is pretty good advantage if you're able to fund a Roth IRA with after-tax dollars. So that's why if you go back to the budgeting process, you put in there a budget category for a Roth IRA. That's after-tax money. You fund it, and 40, 50 years down the road, when you pull it out, you will not be taxed on it. So that's the big advantage to a Roth versus a 401k. But a 401k has some tax advantages up front, but again, you got to pay the piper, the IRS, at the end. A SEP IRA, and this is mainly a SEP IRA, is for individuals that are self-employed, that want to set up like a 401k. SEP IRA, you could actually go up to $57,000 a year. Now I know that's, you'd have to be making a ton of money, but that is also like a 401k. It is a pre-tax contribution. So you would have to pay taxes when you start to retire if you open up a SEP. Okay. One thing about a SEP is that you could contribute any amount that you want. It could be $100, it could be $1,000. Obviously, the maximum allowable is $57,000, but you can fund that, and if 1 year goes by and you have a bad year, obviously this year, most everybody with this COVID situation, uh, you know, people were out of work for weeks, didn't get paid, some for months, so some are still out of work. But you don't have to fund. You don't have to fund a penny. You set up a SEP. It's not like you have to fund it every month or every year. If you have a bad year, or you're in a position where your income fluctuates, 1 year it's a good year, and then another year if there's bad weather or whatever, you're not teaching a lot. You don't have to fund a SEP a penny, and it's fine. It's still fine. Whatever's in there is still yours, and whenever you could start funding it again, you can start funding it. And basically the same goes for a Roth too. I mean, a Roth is after tax. You want to try to fund as much as you can up to the 6,000 or 7,000 every year. But if you can only do, $200, fine. Then, you do a Roth for $200 for 2020. So it's whatever you can contribute. These are just the maximum contribution limits by law. These aren't, you have to fund this amount. It's just the maximum that you can fund. There really are no minimums. Okay, next, where to open a Roth IRA? Again, going back, the three really best providers are Vanguard, Fidelity, and Charles Schwab. You just go to their websites. There's a lot of other places where you could fund a Roth IRA, but you can again do it through your local credit union, a bank, whatever. But these are the three best ways. If you did it through a credit union or bank, you're usually putting your IRAs in a CD, and right now interest rates are so low, you're really not getting the compounding of interest, and it won't grow as much as if you go and put these into investments like a target date retirement account. Because again, even though they will fluctuate over years, over time, they will grow to your advantage, versus just going with your bank or credit union and opening up a Roth IRA in the form of a CD. You can also, I think, open up IRAs at banks in a money market too, but again, their interest rates are just way too low to really put money that you don't have to worry about, and you want it to grow for 20, 30, 40 years. So these three are the best providers, and really recommend those, but there's a lot out there. You can research and find different different investment companies to open up your retirement accounts. With Fidelity and Schwab, they do have local offices. They're kind of spread around. They don't have a lot of them. I know that both Schwab and Fidelity, I know they have an office in Buckhead, and a couple of them have a couple offices in the metro area, but they don't have a lot of them. Vanguard has no offices at all. But the best way and easiest way is really open up these IRA accounts online. In any of the three providers, you go online. It's really easy to open up these accounts. They'll ask you for basic information, your driver's license, social security, and your routing number and checking number of your routing number of your bank and checking and savings account numbers. So it's really basic information, and they're really easy to set up. All their websites are pretty easy to navigate, and that's probably the best bet is to open them up online, again, unless you want to go in person and stop in one of the offices at Schwab or Charles or Fidelity. Once you've had this set up, this is the kind of the one that a lot of people sometimes ignore, is when you set up your account, you actually have to fund your account. So if you set up a Roth IRA or even a SEP account, it's really setting it up is one thing, but then you got to fund it. You got to use, obviously your bank account. You link it to your new IRA account, which they may or may not call a brokerage account because you're doing it through an investment bank. But you gotta fund your account. Sometimes it takes a day or two to complete the process to set it up, but you want to make sure that once you transfer your funds to your new account, you got to take the additional step and make sure that you invest it. Else it'll just sit in with it's basically a money market account or a checking account at one of these places. So you actually will have to go in once the account's funded, and then you got to do the next step and invest it. And that's where you would pick, for example, a target date retirement fund 2060 or whatever it is you want to put these or invest these funds in. It's really a common error for first-time investors, if you're a first-time investor, to leave the funds that you transfer in that money market, or what's called a temporary settlement account, without taking the additional step to invest the money. So please, make sure you go in there after the account's set up and you've transferred funds. You got to do that third step, and you got to really actually invest in the money and pick your investment. Some final thoughts on from the Roth aspect. Once you've opened a Roth IRA, you want to try to resist the urge to monitor it constantly. Typically, these funds are invested again in stocks and bonds, and as we all know, if you listen to any of the news reports or whatever, the market fluctuates. The stock market goes up and down, and it really doesn't help you to just sit there and look at it constantly. So you want to obviously be cognizant your portfolio is going to move up and down with the stock market, but those funds are in there for 20, 30, 40 years. So over time, the stock market seems to be a good bet to invest over time. Again, your Roth IRA money is intended to be, it's tax-free money, and it's to be spent down the road in retirement. So, you put it there. You really don't worry about it. If you have it in these target date funds, again, you look at it periodically, but basically, you want to try as best you can to start funding for retirement. And again, there's no better time to start saving than today. You got to start. You got to be disciplined and say you're going to do it. Okay, I briefly mentioned this SEP IRA, and I'll just give you a little bit more information on that. Again, it's a great tool for those that are self-employed individuals. Again, in like independent, teaching pros, independent contractors, and it's really the 401k equivalent of saving for retirement. But in reality, you can actually save a lot more, if you have the ability to fund more. You can actually fund more in a SEP than you can in a regular 401k that's offered by an employer. Again, if you're self-employed, you don't have access to a company-sponsored 401k plan, then you should consider funding a SEP, opening a SEP IRA, and it can easily get the job done for the future, for retirement. And like I had mentioned earlier, you do not have to contribute to a SEP every year, nor a Roth IRA. And again, you can do both, or you could do one or the other, but they're available for the self-employed from a retirement aspect. They're the two main funding vehicles for retirement. Again, and I mentioned if you had a year, like probably this year, where you're barely scraping by, you don't have anything to contribute, you don't have to contribute a penny to really either one. Where to set up a SEP IRA, it's very similar to the Roth. It's the same providers: Vanguard, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, and there's several other investment companies out there that you could set up your SEP IRA. But again, these are the three most reputable. Real quickly, and I mentioned earlier about the cost. A lot of places charge setup fees. But these three companies, for the most part, do not. Vanguard, Fidelity, and Schwab all have zero setup fees. There might be some smaller investment companies. If you have you run into a friend or you're teaching somebody and they happen to be, they work for a small investment company and they say, hey, come talk to me. Just be leery and make sure that all the fees are disclosed, because a lot of the smaller companies that aren't the size of these three will charge some sort of setup fees, and they could vary. But these three do not. Also, a lot of companies require minimums to open up a retirement account, whether it's a SEP or an IRA. The account minimums at Vanguard has $1,000 account minimum. Fidelity and Charles Schwab have zero. So you could just set up the account, get it all set up, but that year you're not able to contribute, that's fine. But most likely, if you're setting up an account, you want to fund it with something. But again, the only minimum that's really there is Vanguard, and that's $1,000. Fidelity and Charles Schwab, you can set up your account and not have to fund it for whenever you decide to. The third thing is what's called annual service fees. And again, some of the smaller investment companies will charge a service fee, so you got to be careful if you're going with one of those. If you go with Vanguard, they charge a $20 annual service fee, but they will waive it if you set up an account online, which you have to because you can't go to an office, and you have to accept e-delivery on your statements, not paper statements. So if you do that, they waive the $20 annual fee. Fidelity and Schwab do not charge a service fee, so it's zero. So that's these three. Again, the expense wise of setting up these retirement accounts, it's hardly anything. So it really behooves you to do that. That really concludes what I have. I hope this was informative.